Hello, and welcome to the fifth Food Safety Culture webinar that we are putting on in this 10-part series. I can't believe that we're halfway through already. Time is just flying by. For those of you who haven't joined us before, my name is Vanessa Kaufman, and I am the director of the Alliance to Stop Foodborne Illness, which is a program of the organization Stop Foodborne Illness. And together we're bringing together regulators, industry folks, and academics to work on food safety culture programs. And I am so happy to moderate today along with Dr. Conrad Chouanier from the Food and Drug Administration. In this session, we have two really wonderful presenters from ConAgra. Sean Fear and Danielle Richardson are going to talk to you about their multi-year journey in their food safety rewards and recognition program. We're also going to set the stage with a wonderful presentation from Lone Jesperson. Before we dive in, however, and here's the agenda. I just want to remind everyone of a couple housekeeping things. So first, everyone will be muted. So please use the Q&A function to ask questions. In the Q&A function, you can upvote these questions that people are asking, and the most popular ones will rise to the top, and we'll try to get to those first. The event is being recorded, which is wonderful because we will post it online later today or tomorrow, along with some of the slides and your continuing education credit certificate. So if you want to receive one continuing education credit, which is NEHA's accredited, you are welcome to that, and you can download the certificate from the website. I think that is all of the announcements that I have. Conrad, do you want to introduce yourself and share a little bit from the FDA?
Sure. I can get started and Don can say a few words. So my name is Conrad Chouanier. I'm very happy to be here to co-moderate this webinar with Vanessa today. And just wanted to thank you all for continuing to attend. And if this is your first time, welcome. I hope that you find this to be a very useful forum to discuss food safety culture. We are all on our own journeys with food safety culture in different places, different organizations. John and I obviously are from a regulatory agency, and we're also exploring this and on a journey ourselves. So I would just want to welcome you, and I want to pass this on to Don for a few other comments.
Thanks, Conrad. And yes, let me add my welcome. So welcome to everyone joining our webinar today on rewards and recognition programs that drive positive food safety culture. As I get around domestically and internationally, I continue to be impressed by the fact that how many programs, even regulators that are looking at food safety culture. So I think we're really on the right track with this webinar series. I know you're going to find it helpful today. And thank you very much for joining us. Back over to you, Vanessa.
Oh, and I have the distinct honor of letting Lone take it from here. So Lone, go ahead. And I wasn't able to pass you the controls, Lone, so just tell me next slide and I will do that for you.
Vanessa, thank you so much. And Conrad and Don, it's always good to see you in this webinar. And as Vanessa said, it is going to be recorded, and I would certainly recommend also that you go back in time and look at some of the previous sessions, because we've had a lot of great practitioners like Danielle and Sean that are sharing what's going on the topic of culture and food safety. Today, we're talking about reward and recognize, specifically around how that drives a positive food safety culture. So I'm going to share a little bit around why we recognize, what it is when we talk about recognizing individuals, and hopefully give you some ideas as for what you can take away for the future. And also got the wonderful opportunity to share some stories from our network at Cultivate. So if we look at first, why do we recognize? We have to be very brutally honest and put it out there and say that it's good business sense as well. Global Force has done some wonderful work on recognition and the impact on business performance over a very long time. And one of the things they found is that trust is one of the senior leadership characteristics that really drive and influence culture. So how do we get to that level of trust? It is around recognition. And as you can see in the gray bubble there, about 82% of workers in this study from Global Force were recognized by their leaders in the last month. And they trust their leaders more than those that haven't been recognized, which is what we've learned from Global Force. And that's why we can put that performance equals trust equals reward and recognize together. If we then look a little deeper and also just go back into some of the old material from the next slide, Vanessa, from Maslow, you all know this, but I think it's a good time to bring it back up. It's very relevant when we talk about recognizing and rewarding each other for food safety. These different needs that we have as human beings, and the workplace plays a unique role for fulfilling all of these 5 needs. We've talked a lot about, obviously, the psychological or physiological needs, making sure that we have everything that we need to be able to feed ourselves and our families. Safety needs, certainly something that we talked a lot about throughout the pandemic and continue to around psychological safety. And then we get into social needs. And this is where we can take a page of Maslow's work and really talk about how does social needs, a sense of belonging, feeling that sense of camaraderie, of trusting each other, how does that influence what we do for food safety every day? And having a recognition program that delivers some of those social needs goes to the very core of what motivates us to take action on food safety every day. Let's just dive one step further into it, Vanessa, before we go in and look at what is recognition, and talk about also what happens in our heads as human beings when we feel that we're recognized by others. We have this exuberant release of oxytocin, which is one of our 4 happy chemicals. And who doesn't want more happy chemicals in their lives, right? And having that interaction with others, where others are appreciative of you, show their appreciation, that simple thank you it goes a long way in generating oxytocin. And the good thing about oxytocin release is that it's gratitude that spreads. So if Sean, Danielle, and I were looking at each other here and we appreciate each other, I know that that generates oxytocin in all 3 of us, and it allows each of us as well to give that on to other people. So it makes good sense to have a strong rewards and recognition program in your organization for many reasons. One is it is good business sense. It certainly plays into how we're motivated to take actions and behave in a certain way for food safety every day. And you know what? It just makes us happier. And who wouldn't want that on an ongoing basis? So let's look at what is it that we're recognizing for. If we look at we use this sort of three-pronged approach to that. Your company there's a purpose around food safety in your organization. You might not have formally defined what the purpose is, but I would recommend that you spend a little bit of time on doing that. It sounds like something that should be just second nature to all of us, but it's remarkable how much you learn when you start to ask others in other functions about what's the purpose of food safety for our business. Have those statements and then start to align behaviors to those statements. We like to see behaviors that are observable. You can see them. They're time bound. They happen every week, every day, once a month. Every time that we get into a certain facility in a certain situation, and then there's a reason why we're behaving in a way. When we define behaviors in a measurable way, that's what we look at. Then we get the consequences, reward, recognition, escalation if things are not going so well. And there's a double error between recognition or behavior and consequence, because we influence behaviors with consequences. When we behave in a certain way, we feel the consequences. So let's look at a couple of specific examples for that. Here's a store manager working in a wonderful convenience store in Wisconsin. And there's a purpose statement that says, put the safety of our consumers first. That's one of the purpose statements for food safety. So what is the behavior that we're looking for consistently from managers in the store manager position? Manager discuss food safety performance with everybody in the store monthly, because it then drives the conversation with others. The consequence was seeing improved performance, and the store manager is recognized monthly in the monthly post by CEO. So there's a direct connection between the purpose of why we have food safety in our organization to how we behave, and then also what we as individuals feel in the form of consequence. Let's just take it one more before we go into the examples. We look at a production supervisor in a manufacturing facility. This particular purpose has protect the safety of our families and those we serve. That's the purpose of food safety. a behavior that we're looking for from all of the production supervisors in this particular company. Team members found a broken seal, supervisors stopped the process and led the investigation. No waiting for FSQA, no waiting for the permission to do anything like that. That's the behavior that we're seeing. The consequence of that, less product discarded and recognized in the monthly business meeting. That's the supervisor. So again, we have a defined behavior that we can train out with individuals, but we can also link to consequences. So that's a little bit of hopefully inspiration to saying, what are we actually recognizing people for? Because I get faced with the question often from leaders as, am I thanking people for coming to work? Well, do you know what's in the current environment, it's probably not such a bad idea. But it's also just a good idea to formalize what are the behaviors that you'd like to see people recognized for. Let's have a quick look at some hows. The first one is the pyramid of recognition, and I really owe it to Kim Crawford at Birchwood Foods for bringing this one up as the core of the Birchwood recognition program, and she permitted me to share this with you today as well. There's 3 stages to this recognition program, and it's a formal, informal, and everyday that happens. And if we look at the frequencies of that, the formal, if we click on a little bit with Vanessa here, Vanessa, thank you so much. The formal ones are really those that happen on an annual basis. So lots of companies have annual recognition ceremonies, the CEO reward, etc. If we just click through this 3 times, that'd be great. Vanessa, thank you. We see the informal are more the monthly to the quarterly. That happens not necessarily with an event, but it could just be that we see something and therefore we recognize somebody for that. And then we have the daily to weekly, which is that every day that we interact with each other, it's the thank yous, it's the impromptu because we're seeing something that's really good and somebody that helped us out, etc. If we then look at impact on the other side of this, and if we just click through those as well, impact is really, so what kind of impact does it have whether I now adopt these new behaviors that we saw in the 3-pronged approach slides before? Impact is about 1 to 10% of the annual awards. And as you can see, as we get further and further to the everyday, we see more and more impact on our behaviors. And it is a little bit because we have this proximity effect, right? The more if we are trying to change a behavior, the more feedback we get immediately on that, the more impact it has on our habit building and actually adopting these new behaviors. So the pyramid of recognition is really one I hope you'll take with you and look at how can you structure your program around these 3 levels. Let's look at some cases. Thank you to Ray Boyd from Musgrave in Ireland for this one. We all know that World Food Safety Day is just a good opportunity for all of us to celebrate those around us. And put it in your diary if it's not already there. June 7th, 2023 is the next one. Ray is actually in green on this collage of photos, so he is the one inside the bug. And it was about making food safety fun that way, and also recognizing those that are really standing up and saying food safety starts with me. So some good practice there for recognition on an annual basis from the Musgrave team. If we go to the next one, this one is shared by Jerry Wilson at Kagome in the US. And it's also an annual, but also monthly. It's called the Golden Tomato, the Kagome Golden Tomato. And as you can see, it's about having some measures that everybody can influence. So first time quality, shift efficiencies, lost time accidents, and also alchemy training completed. So it's a combination of these 4 measures that individual and teams can then strive to win the Golden Tomatoes for actually driving high performance in these areas. So I think, again, another good example of an annual and monthly reward. Let's look at another one from the good folks out in Australia, Bulla Dairy. Thank you to Rachel Downey for sharing this one. So what Rachel and the team have put in place is, and lots of you are doing this these days, putting Gemba walks in place and systems. And the way that Rachel and the team has looked at this is to say every time a senior leader does a walk, they have to nominate a food safety champion. And then there's 3 awards per month that can be given to individuals for championship, and is celebrated in the monthly senior leadership meeting. So again, it's a good way to connect the leadership with the front line, where we know there's sometimes a gap when we do the assessments. The quarterly values that they have at Bulla as well is one where the CEO is recognizing recipients as well for outstanding food safety performance. And there's a dinner and a monetary value associated. So again, just good examples, I think, for connecting systems, people on an annual and monthly basis. Then we have a really unique example from the New England Seafood Company in the UK. And what Teresa and Sam are doing is just simply also wonderful, because they have this food safety culture bus, and you can get on the bus if you're recognized by one of your colleagues. So you get a bus pass. Those are the little cards you can see on the fish there. And that's a way for them to make it fun, but also to just make sure that it's peer-to-peer recognition on a monthly and a weekly basis. Finally, I want you to meet Heidi. Heidi is a food safety leader. She is a food company in the UK. And one of the things that Heidi is a single mom, and her operations director founded the best way to recognize Heidi for her good work was to, instead of giving her a gift card or a new t-shirt or some swag, was to say, hey, do you know what? How about an extra day off? Because here's a single mom that can really use the time with her family at home, and by tailoring your recognitions to those team members that you know so well, has that very significant impact on all of us as well. What a wonderful way to say thank you. So getting more time with family is certainly also a wonderful way to be recognized. It's something that can also be done on an everyday ad hoc basis. Let me just sum it up quickly what you can do for tomorrow, and then we're going to hear from Danielle and Sean about the wonderful journey that ConAgra has been on. Some tips for you tomorrow. Prioritize. So find a way to make your food safety and food safety recognition reward program a priority for your leadership. It's a tough one to have a grassroots movement around. It's really something that needs to be anchored into your leadership priorities. Analyze, take the pyramid of recognition from Kim at Birchwood and see, where do you sit on those 3 levels? Do you have something that covers a little bit of everything, or do you have some gaps? And then connect with your colleagues in other functions, because we know that colleagues in HR, in operations, in store management, some of them have some wonderful practices that you can certainly reuse, because why would we want to reinvent something that might already be out there and working well for our colleagues at different locations and in positions? Invent new tactics for recognition, but I'd really recommend that you have a big ear to the ground, listen to those. Back to Heidi's story, what makes sense to the individuals you'd like to recognize, what could connect it best into the purpose. And then, do you know what? Take a page out of Ray's book with that green buck there from Musgrave and make it fun, because we are often the bearers of not so good news in food safety. This is our opportunity to make it fun. What do you think, Sean?
I love it.
Beautiful.
I love it.
Let's hear your story from ConAgra, and certainly want to just also, Vanessa scooted over this real quick, Sean, and I know you're part of the toolkit, but we have the toolkit from STOP, and it's a work in progress. It's something that we need to do much more of, but it's I'd encourage everybody to sign up for it. And Sean, over to you, and Danielle, looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you. And thank you all, Donald, Conrad, Lone, excellent. Vanessa, thanks for having us here. Just a couple of slides from the ConAgra team. And I see, Vanessa, you're driving. So if you wouldn't mind, if you could go forward. So here's just our brief agenda. A couple of introductions. You'll get to learn a little bit about myself, which will bore you, but you'll get to learn about Danielle, and she's pretty exciting. So next, our journey. We want to talk about our journey. We want to talk about, I guess I shouldn't use the word next. I'm sorry, Vanessa. I'll say next slide. I'm sorry. So we're going to talk about our journey of culture. We're going to talk about the activation of that culture. We're going to talk about a survey we did. We're going to talk about our rewards program, which is RISE, Reduce Incidence, Sustain Excellence, and then Food Safety Week. So I'm going to cover half, and Danielle's going to cover the other half. And I think we're ready now for the next slide. My apologies, Vanessa. Okay. And next slide after this is our introductions. There's me. You can see I've grown some glasses and a beard. That might be a little confusing. I've been in the industry about 30 years, and I've been with ConAgra for 20. I've just had a very exciting career and done a lot of different things, such as R&D, as well as in-plant quality and corporate quality. As Lone mentioned, I am a collaborator in the Food Safety Culture Toolkit, which I highly recommend to all of those out there. And that's me in a nutshell. Danielle, do you want to talk about you?
Sure. So I've been in the food industry for just about, or a little over 27 years. I actually started out in a manufacturing facility in a QA lab. So right now, I've over the 27 years, I've done all kinds of different things. Right now, I'm the director of food safety. So my team really looks primarily at all the food safety training programs for the entire company. We review food safety regulations and make sure we comply. We manage, or actually I manage any types of food safety recalls, and we do food safety plans. So anything revolving with compliance, we make sure that we know what we're doing, we know how to do it, we put in plans to do it, and if it fails, I'm the recall coordinator when it does fail.
You get the exciting work. Okay.
Not really.
So as I alluded to, before we jump right into rewards, we briefly want to share our journey. So I want to spend some time talking about how we, the ConAgra team, landed on a recognition program and how we decided on what to include in that program. And I hope at the end, you'll all observe that we added some very purposeful elements into the program as part of its design. So let's talk first about that planning and exploration team that we formed. I'll offer a little bit of advice. If you're going to go out and do this work, it's important to include multiple disciplines so that you can generate and capture a very broad perspective of what you might need with your team. And so as you can see, here's just some buckets of the folks that we incorporated when we kicked off our journey back in 2020. And so we didn't just have corporate people. We wanted corporate and plant people. And amongst those corporate and plant people, we had a nice balance. We had training team members, in-plant quality members, platform members who are responsible for multiple plants, supply chain, audit, and then the bucket I would fit in would be the corporate food safety team. So that was our balanced team. Go ahead to the next slide, if you will. So beyond just looking internally, which is what I think a lot of folks spend time doing, the other piece of advice I'll offer is go look outside your organization. Benchmark yourselves against others. Go do some interviews with peer groups, which is exactly what we did. We talked to a number of companies of or about our same size, and we learned in those conversations that everybody was getting food safety training, not just folks that are prepping the food, but sales team members, people who are retrieving grocery carts from the parking lot, because we did talk to a retailer. We observed that there are CEOs who are actively messaging food safety culture publicly, not just talking about business performance, but talking about food safety. There were companies that were conducting annual food safety surveys, which we hadn't done in many years. And then lastly, incorporating both the use of food safety culture, but also having a food safety culture manager or director. And so that actually falls under Danielle, the title of food safety manager. So beyond, again, looking internally, you want to go external. White pages, there's many written on the topics. There are some great books written on the topics. Obviously, there is the toolkit, which I hope that as soon as you finish listening to all of us, you'll go explore that. But again, the philosophy should be food safety is not a competitive advantage. All consumers deserve safe food. So share and explore. Thank you, Vanessa. So from our interviews, we landed on the need for a survey. And so in order to most efficiently conduct the survey, we partnered with our EH&S, our environmental health and safety team, because they were also looking at doing a survey. And we thought 2 surveys would be too confusing. I mean, go back, this was 2020. We were still in the depths of COVID. And we needed our folks, to really be engaged in the work and not distracted by multiple surveys. So we did partner, and we thought that was the right thing to do. In the development of the food safety survey, we focused in on 4 key pillars. starting like think of an onion, knowledge of the individual, self-empowerment of the individual, plant management, engagement, and then the overall organization. And so we were able to develop 16 questions that carefully represented those 4 buckets. And then we launched that survey in 2021. Next slide, please. So what did we learn from all that? Well, I'll start at the bottom of this slide. We were pretty amazed at our results. We had a response rate of 85%, which is rather unprecedented. It's pretty high. I don't think we've ever done surveys, at least within our organization, received such a good response rate. But I will say we had a good marketing campaign. And the other thing we did that made it so successful is that we eliminated one of our 20-minute trainings for the month in which the survey was launched, because we wanted to give employees time to do it. So rather than burden them, we created some time for them to conduct that survey. And so a few key things that we also did as a combination of our external focus, our internal focus, is that we didn't have a food safety culture management commitment statement, and we do now. We weren't using food safety culture in our job descriptions, and now we do. And these are just little things that you can do to help enhance and enforce the direction you want to go. And then lastly, while all of our manufacturing plants were committed to taking monthly trainings, and we were metricing those trainings to get a good understanding that they're being completed, we weren't mandating food safety training to our corporate R&D teams. And so now we do. So again, that internal, that external, that survey, we learned a lot. And the good news is we found a way to implement and close many of those gaps. Next slide, please. So training. When it comes to training, we recognize that while our training was pretty good, it could be better. And we heard and saw comments in the survey that supported that. So we decided to get a little bit more interactive in our training and kind of mix up the way we do our training so there could be more gamification type and such like that. So one more slide, and then you guys are going to get to hear from Danielle, because I've probably bent your ear too long. All right, so the big aha from the survey is that our employees voiced a need for a couple of things. They wanted recognition, they wanted more communication, they wanted more interaction. And so we were able to essentially not just launch a reward program, but launch a reward program that would build on those elements that were voiced from the survey. Because we actually had the idea, hey, maybe we should do a recognition program. We said, hold on a minute, let's get our survey results back. Let's collectively balance the information we've gotten from our external conversations, and then we'll purposefully build this survey. And so I do want to build on Loan's comments about formal, informal, and everyday. Taking a step back, we had no formal. We were mainly informal, and it was inconsistent. And we didn't have an everyday. But the good news, and here's where I'm going to turn it over to Danielle, is that we were able to build those elements into the recognition program. And so I'm going to stop. Danielle, you take it from here and go amaze them with what we were able to do with our program.
Thanks, Sean. So like Sean said, another focus area from our perception survey is that those employees really wanted recognition. Everybody wants to have a voice in what they do and be recognized for doing great work and making a difference. So earlier this year, we developed that RISE program, and it gave the employees a voice and an opportunity to make a difference in their job. So like Sean said, RISE stands for Reduce Incidents and Sustain Excellence. And the focus of this program was to give our floor-level hourly employees a platform to submit those suggestions. So anytime they saw something that they thought that, hey, this could make a change, it could drive food safety improvements in their facility, it would give them that opportunity to make those suggestions to make a difference. And we did offer some recognition for that. Anybody who submitted an idea to get a special program shirt so they could wear it and show off that, hey, I'm trying to make a difference. And then follow-up to that idea submission was that the teams could present their ideas on a quarterly basis. It was a competition presented to a corporate team. We would vote on it, and after selecting a winner, that plant would be considered the RISE winner of the quarter. They get a special banner and we would offer additional prizes for the winning submissions to really call them out for, hey, they really took the time to make a difference. Next slide. So the first iteration of the program is, again, focused on that floor level hourly employee, and it required the development and submission of the idea to come solely from the hourly employee. These employees, they're on the floor, they're hands-on, they're the ones who have these really great ideas, but we found that this program really wasn't very accessible to them. And it was really somewhat intimidating asking them to present to a corporate team, put the presentation together, submit their idea. And after we didn't get a lot of ideas or suggestions, we actually took that feedback and understood that, you know what, this probably isn't the best way to implement this program. So we pivoted a little bit to a slightly different model. And it still requires these ideas to come from hourly employees, but now they do have the support of plant management staff. So that plant management staff would help them get their ideas submitted, vetted out, and then help them with that presentation. So it took that intimidation factor and made it a lot easier and facilitated getting those ideas submitted. And since we made this change, we've actually seen the number of submissions increase that we've received, and we have a lot of great ideas coming in from the program. Next slide. So what we're doing this week, I know Food Safety Week was back in June. We got a little bit delayed. So this week we're actually celebrating Food Safety Week, and we're kicking it off with a campaign theme of Be a Food Safety Hero all year. We developed and mailed all of our campaign materials, and those campaign materials included things such as posters, badge inserts, talking points. We had a really emotional video that talked about the impact of food safety. These were all mailed out to several key leaders within the company at a corporate level, and they went to all of our plants. And the purpose of this campaign collateral was to help facilitate a discussion during plant meetings about food safety. And then we also have the digital messaging to promote our campaign that really focuses on the things that we can do to encourage a great food safety culture. Next slide. So here are two examples of posters that we developed that really highlight some of the key activities that everybody can do to keep food safe. It's really very basic things, but it's a nice reminder to help them realize that, you know, things like as simple as washing your hands and changing your gloves, wearing your PPE can really make a big difference in promoting food safety. And we hope that comic book superhero theme conveys that food safety message in a fun way that's really engaging to the employees. After all, who doesn't love superheroes who fight unsafe food practices? So far, we've had some really great feedback on the content, and we expect that it'll add an element of excitement to our training and food safety culture program so we can continue to build on that throughout the year. Next slide. So a big part of our Be a Food Safety Hero campaign encourages each plant to recognize employees who really characterize those elements of being a food safety hero. And the purpose of the campaign is to offer local recognition that can be given out at any time at our facilities on a daily or weekly or monthly basis, whatever works for the plant. And as we've learned from Lone, we realize that frequent recognition is really vital to supporting a good food safety culture. Everybody wants to be acknowledged for doing a good job, and we think that providing things such as certificates for the employee, badge inserts that recognizes these employees and calls them out is really a great way to salute those who go above and beyond and thank them for a job well done. And then giving them this type of recognition instills a sense of pride and realizing that we are really paying attention and we are recognizing and encouraging those employees that if you see something that might be wrong, you need to say something and do something, because food safety doesn't happen by accident. So thank you all for listening to our presentation. And if you have any questions, Sean and I would be happy to answer any of those questions.
Thank you so much, Danielle and Sean. And yes, now is the time for Q&A, my favorite part of these webinars. And it looks like we have a ton of questions coming in. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, but please type your questions in to the Q&A and upvote those ones that you really want to hear the answers to. And Conrad, I think you should ask the first question because I've been so busy over here clicking through these slides that I haven't had a chance to read them yet.
All right. Well, there are a lot of questions for Sean and Danielle, I can tell you that. So I'm looking at the one that got the most likes, at least what I can see is like people are really interested in seeing the survey that you developed. I'm wondering if there's anything you can share about it, either the questions you asked or anything else you might want to be able to share.
Well, I think the key, because I don't have the questions in front of me, but I think the key is to make sure, and I talked about that onion, make sure that when you develop questions that you're not just asking about, do you feel educated? Do you feel empowered? Do you feel supported? Do you feel that the entire organization really cares about what you're doing? You have to have all four of those elements. If you only ask questions in your survey about how competent you feel about the job you do, you're missing out on those other layers of the onion. So essentially what you would look to do, depending on how you were to create a survey within your organization, is just make sure you're touching on those areas. There are a lot of good elements, both in the toolkit, as well as I would say the GFSI white paper. You can learn a lot from that and use that toward developing your survey. Danielle, I don't know if you build.
Yeah, it's, we ask some things. Do you feel empowered? What do you think about training? What suggestions you have? And one of the results, the reason we developed the gamification training was because they basically said the training is boring. So we actually took that training. I did a hands-on foreign material training in the plants, and we took elements of that training that included relevant information, real life plant photos, and then we made it interactive. We asked them questions during the training, and that's actually been really successful. It's been taken by, that training in particular for foreign materials, been taken by 8,600 of our employees.
And Danielle, you've done road shows with that training. You've gone out into the plants, trained in person, which I think is the most beneficial way to train.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So your survey, just a couple more questions. People are wondering, was it anonymous? Was it voluntary? And how did you market it to get people to take it?
So it was voluntary and it was anonymous. We leveraged DuPont to help us with the survey. And so what was nice about that is that they have a very structured, very EH&S focused approach. So they're very well known. They're very well buttoned up. They're good at grabbing the data and analyzing it for us. But it was voluntary and it was anonymous. How did we get such a good participation rate? I think it's because, as you heard me mention, we did a substitution. We said, hey, the employees were scheduled to spend 20 minutes on training XYZ. So instead of doing the training, we'll go ahead and take them off the line and we'll have them do the survey. But no one was forced to do it. I mean, again, while we did have 85%, we still had 15% that didn't. So obviously it wasn't forced.
Conrad, I've got a question here that I think is really interesting for the ConAgra team, and maybe Lone can jump in too with all of her great work that she's done in the field. So Janet asks, how do you consider the potential impact of monetary rewards on employee behaviors in the context of manufacturing incidents to get rewarded for dealing with? That was a question in a lawsuit I'm aware of. Thanks, Janet.
Lone, are you going to take that one?
I can. So there's a significant amount of studies out there that says that monetary recognition doesn't change behavior, at least not necessarily consistently the behaviors that we want to see for the future. So I go back to, if we just look at that Maslow's pyramid again, we do need to put some food on the table, but for us to be acting on food safety with an attitude that's positive towards striving for the consistency and the watch outs for risks, for feeling that we are actually in control of what we're doing, to have skin in the game, then we have to look beyond monetary recognition. And I think we've seen enough examples of as well that monetary recognition can drive exactly the opposite behaviors that we're looking for. So I think it's one that's been proven over and over again not to drive consistent positive behaviors, not just for food safety, but also for just a long-term attitude towards a subject matter. So before I toss it back to Sean, there's a great book out, The Power of Thanks. I have no shares, don't know the authors, so it has nothing to do with that. But it's just a really good book that has a lot of practical advice around giving thanks. And we're about a month away from Thanksgiving, so who doesn't want to do that at this point in time? But it also has a great section on the difference between what they call psychic awards versus monetary awards. So long-winded answer, Vanessa. Sean, what do you think? How does this work?
Yeah, so the monetary comment came up in our working groups, and we decided against it. We didn't see any real benefit to monetary. I'll tell you what we did here, though, is that our folks love to wear a T-shirt that has RISE written on it, and when they've done something, they get that special thing. So I guess you could say an $8 T-shirt. That's the monetary that we landed on, but they love it. They react very well to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's something that's visual. Other people see it, they notice it, and then it's like, hey, how did you get that? How can I get one? It really drives that interest when they start seeing something that they don't have that I want to get.
Yeah, it's not a Gucci purse, but it's a T-shirt.
And it generates oxytocin, right? Just to get back to the happy chemical. We actually do generate happy chemicals when we feel a sense of belonging, and also, ooh, I want to be part of that.
We could probably spray those shirts with oxytocin, right?
Up the nose is the best way, Sean.
Okay. All right. Danielle?
Oh.
Nope. Sorry.
Noted.
Talking about feeling belonging and being inclusive. We have a lot of different companies on that participate in this webinar. You, Sean and Danielle, are part of a very large food manufacturing company, but we have other types of firms that have been listening in. And one question that came through is, how might you take something like your RISE program and make it work for a small company that might only have 20 to 30 people without a big corporate structure?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that program can work for any size company. It's giving the people the opportunity to be taken seriously, to say, hey, I see something that I don't feel is right. Let's submit it. Let's consider it, and let's make a difference with this idea. Because like I said, the people that are actually doing the job have the best ideas. They see the struggles, they see things that need improvement, and they're the ones that can really drive that improvement.
Yeah, and the only thing I'll add is that given the number of years I spent in R&D, I always have that jobs mentality, right? What is the job to be done? So even if you're a small company, think real hard about what it is you want to do. What job do you want to complete? And then, start from there and leverage the toolkit. And I think you'll find success no matter what your size.
Lauren, you have something to add?
I actually think that as a small or micro company, you have some opportunities that Sean and Danielle don't have. Because so we work with a wonderful company in the UK. There's 12 of them. And the owner, Namisha, she knows her team members in and out. And therefore, she can tailor recognition and rewarding to what gives most meaning for the individual. Danielle and John, you have no hope to even get close to that, right? Because you can't possibly get your arms around that to that personal level, because you're such a large organization. So I think small and medium, you instead of necessarily saying, how can we take RISE into our environment? I think you need to look at what are the opportunities you have because of your size, and you have a lot of them. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I 100% agree with that.
Yeah, and with smaller companies, there's more of a personal stake in it, because everyone plays a bigger role rather than, with a big company, everyone plays this tiny little part. So I think you would have more, it would be easier to get more buy-in because there's such a more personal connection with smaller companies.
And your T-shirt budget's going to be smaller.
Yeah, you can use more oxytocin on them.
There you go.
I like
Pushing
it.
your oxy.
Yvonne asked a question that's sort of related, and I want to pose it to you all. Is there a risk of people complying with food safety culture only to gain rewards? Would that promote negative feelings in those who don't gain rewards?
I think an element of that could exist. And to Lone's earlier point, I think that's why you want to avoid the monetary part. I think you want to focus more in on rewarding and recognizing the behaviors that your organization needs demonstrated, and with a food safety culture emphasis. And could there be hurt feelings? I think there can always be hurt feelings, but there can also be those who strive to do a little bit better. And those are the ones that are going to be rewarded.
Yeah, and I think it's not just submitting an idea, it's they actually have to go above and beyond. It's easy to submit an idea and get a t-shirt, but they have to do a presentation. There's a whole lot of other things we expect them to do. So we really expect them to have some skin in the game when they present those ideas.
Yeah.
I think it's if I can add, I mean, it's really about establishing those norms, right? So you want to reward the people you want to see, and if people want those rewards, then they'll also follow, right?
Correct.
That's so true, Conrad. It's exactly about, I mean, I spoke a little bit about trust in the first slide. Trust, there's two main drivers of trust or enemies of trust: transparency and consistency. So if you are consistent with the norms or the behaviors that you recognize, if you are transparent as for why somebody is recognized, you know what? Then it's something, to Danielle's great point. Then everybody wants the t-shirt, right? So I'm sorry, Sean, but that t-shirt budget is going to be out of this world.
So there is a question here. I don't know if you're going to be able to answer it, but I do want to acknowledge it. Talking again about different types of players in the food sector, right? So this question, whoops, the screen jumped, but it was about food safety culture in restaurants. And it's a fast environment, and it's hard to get employees engaged. And I don't know if you have any analogs in ConAgra where you have a fast-paced environment and it might be hard to engage employees that you might have, or Lone, if you've had any experience in restaurants that you might be able to share.
I don't mind jumping in first. So right out of college, I was with both Boston Market and Fazoli's in corporate quality as a quality manager, and I was the food safety trainer for ServSafe. And you're right. One of the biggest constraints is turnover, and we're seeing that right now post-COVID. And the restaurant industry has seen it, for many, many years to a greater degree than anybody in food manufacturing. I would say, going back to that jobs theory comment, what can you do to reduce your turnover first and foremost? And the other thing is, don't let that turnover dissuade you from maybe even more emphasis on training. Yes, maybe that employee started today and they're going to be gone in a week, but you got to train them anyway, because if you don't, someone else will. And so, yeah, it is tough. The food industry, the restaurant level, very tough. I get it, but I think you can find your groove. I think you can find a way, and it is going to take a lot more effort for you versus a small food manufacturing company, simply because I think you're dealing with a ton of turnover.
And I think one thing that helps too is, we encourage them, if you see something, say something right then. Don't leave it go. Don't let it pass. Take the opportunity and correct that behavior right then and there. I think in the restaurant, because you're turning over so fast, that you've got to address it immediately.
I think there's two things, Conrad, I'd like to add, and I'd actually like to hear from Vanessa as well, because I know that Mitzi and Vanessa did a cracking food safety culture presentation at NRA. Two things. I think it comes back to your point around norms, Conrad, because I think you need to establish a norm in a restaurant, even so if you have 5 people there, if you have 30 people there, where the norm is that this is what we accept and this is what we don't accept, and we hold each other accountable. Because again, I go back to that a restaurant manager or store manager can't possibly be looking at everybody at any point in time, right? So it's around how can you get that collective social norm where we hold each other accountable. And that has a big part to do with recognition. How do you actually onboard new people into a culture where we acknowledge, we recognize, we celebrate those that really hold our norm around food safety alive by inviting others to adopt it. And the other part I just want to make mention of, do you know what? There's and Ben Chapman at North Carolina State and his team, they've done a lot of work on this as well with TikTok. We have different technologies available, quick, short messages that grab attention, that just nudges us to think about what's important. And I think we just have to also adopt some of those principles in restaurants and stores, because that's another thing that restaurants and stores have going for them that Sean and Danielle don't necessarily in a manufacturing environment have going for them. You can have your phone with you, right? You can potentially have a device with you, and you can get those little nudges and prompts when you're in a restaurant setting, potentially. So I just think norms and technology, I think those two have to come together in a fast-paced environment. Vanessa, do you have anything to add from your learnings at NRA?
Yeah, sure. I could add a couple of things. I think, we're talking a lot about, ConAgra is a huge company, right? And maybe a restaurant's a little smaller, but there are so many similarities, especially when we're talking about food safety culture. Everybody wants to be rewarded, whether or not you work at a huge company, a little company, a manufacturing company, a retail operation. Everybody likes to feel good about the work that they're doing, especially when the work they're doing is so important, like food safety. So I guess focus on the similarities here instead of the big differences. And I know we've been plugging the toolkit a lot today, but if you go to stopfoodborneillness.org, there really are some wonderful resources there that you can learn about food safety culture, and we have some rewards and recognition learnings there also. And I think something that we haven't really touched on so much is the need to figure out what works well in your organization. So the ConAgra team did a great job of surveying what was going to work well for them, but it might be very different in a different culture. Or there was a question in here in the Q&A about what if you're on a different continent and people aren't speaking English. All of these different cultural differences can lead to different ways to reward people that's going to work differently for them. So having an employee of the month where your picture's taken and it's put out in a newsletter maybe isn't the best option for you. Maybe somebody wants a little bit more personal or smaller reward. We're talking about monetary versus t-shirts, days off, Lone mentioned, all of these differences, you really need to figure out what works well for your organization. And I know we just have a couple of minutes left. I have one question that I think we should ask the ConAgra team. So Rosalind, go ahead, Conrad, sorry.
I just wanted to put a plug because we're talking about different types of organizations here. And, we here that have been working on this webinar series want to hear from different parts of the food sector. And so if you have some experiences, whether you're in a restaurant or a small company that you think would be of value for all of us to hear about, then please reach out to us and we can think about whether or not we can include you as part of one of these future webinars so we can have more perspectives shared in these forums.
Yep.
Absolutely. And that is in the post attendee survey. So when the webinar closes, you'll have a survey pop up. It's one of the last questions is if you have ideas for a future webinar or companies that should be participating, you can fill those in there. So please make sure to do that. Okay, you ready for the last question? Rosalind asks, since implementing RISE, what improvements have you seen in your food safety quality KPIs?
The RISE program is actually pretty new, so unfortunately it hasn't driven a lot of improvements yet, but it is something that we are very much focused on, is reducing our quality incidents and improving those KPIs so that we drive down those incidents?
Yeah, we look at our near misses and our quality incidences very closely. We look at other KPIs within our facilities, but I do think it is a little too early right now. You heard Danielle talk about how we launched our 1.0 and then our 2.0, and that was a pivot. And that's the other thing I would recommend is that whatever you do, get a gauge on how it's working. Don't be afraid to pivot in an appropriate manner to satisfy the needs of your employees and to satisfy the needs of your program.
Mm-hmm.
Don't fall on a sword. Pivot.
Conrad, it sounds like we need to have the ConAgra team back for a capstone where they can share some of their wonderful work that they've accomplished.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Did you have any other questions that you wanted to ask in the last remaining minutes?
Well, I saw one question that got a lot of upvoting and it keeps on disappearing because of the upvoting, but it's something about you had this program within one part of your organization. I wish I could find it now. I think it was in your FSQA group, but had you considered putting it in other parts of your organization, like operations?
So yes, the answer is yes. We are going to start primarily with EH&S, so worker safety. We think there's a great bolt-on fit to where we can take what we're doing in our plants from a food safety perspective and also leverage that for worker safety. And I think you just have to be choiceful in terms of where do you want to invest for recognition, and certainly food safety, very value add for our investors, our brand, and our consumers, but also worker safety for our employees. We want to keep them safe and know that they're safe when they come to work. So where will we go? Will there be a third leg? Will it be sales or somewhere else? Maybe, but right now we're honed in on the two most critical and important areas, which is food safety and worker safety.
And does your food safety cross-cultural team include folks from operations, sales, and R&D, or is it all FSQA folks?
R&D, food safety ops, and quality in our plant, yes. We don't have any of the other elements, other than I will say, Larry, who's a member of our team, and Melissa, she's our creative artist. Larry has a marketing background, and we leveraged him and the creative of Danielle to do a lot of the launch of our material. But I think specific to your question, we probably have some room to bring in, and I would start with procurement. Bring in procurement, make sure they understand. But in terms of sales, maybe that's an opportunity down the road.
Great.
Okay, and I think if I can share this last slide, I think it's a great opportunity for us to just wrap up here and thank our wonderful panelists. So Danielle, Sean, Lone, thank you so much for sharing today. I think everybody has taken away something that they can implement, hopefully, in their own organization, whether or not you are in a manufacturing facility, a restaurant, or a nonprofit office. Our next webinar will be on training and education, and that will be January 25th. You'll get an invite to that in the email. Thank you that comes out tomorrow, along with all of the materials that I mentioned earlier, including the continuing education credit, some slides, and a recording of this that you can share with your friends and coworkers who maybe weren't able to join. Again, if you have thoughts and ideas for future webinars, the training and education one came from our last webinar, if you were able to attend that. So somebody in the audience had a question about that. So, we are listening, we're here. We're excited to have your feedback so that we can continue to bring you the most important content and things that really excite you and what you want to learn about in food safety culture. So thank you so much to everyone. And my email is at the bottom. If you have more things that you want to share, it's there. And please fill out the survey. And Conrad, any last thoughts?
No, I want to thank everyone for being here. I think there was a great quote on one of Loan's slides about, everyone has a food safety culture, but it all depends on whether or not you're intentional about it. And so I think this webinar provided some great ideas for being intentional about our food safety cultures and improving it. So thank you all for participating today.
Yes, thank you so much, and we'll see
Thanks
you
for
in
having us.
January.
Thank you.
Thanks.